Truistery Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot.
Today,
Truistery Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. The fire still crackled in the hearth of the Draven home, but it hadn't felt warm in a long time. Elowen Maris sat at the edge of the living room sofa, hands cradling a chipped ceramic mug filled with tea gone cold. The air was quiet, too quiet. Somewhere in the distance, the wind rattled the shutters of the house in Wister Hollow, but inside, silence reigned like a permanent guest. Even the clock on the wall seemed hesitant to tick too loudly, as if afraid to interrupt the cold war simmering between husband and wife. Across the room, Cale Draven scrolled through his phone, legs spread wide, his body language communicating exactly what he thought of her presence, irrelevant. He hadn't looked at her in hours, maybe days. Elowen could barely recall the last time he said her name without bitterness hanging off the syllables like rusted chains. She shifted, subtly. The movement caught his attention. "Do you have to fidget so much?" he muttered, not looking up. "Sorry," she whispered.
sorry.
She said that word so often, it barely sounded like English anymore. It had become more of a breath than a statement. Cale went back to scrolling, and Elowen stared at the fire. Not because it was mesmerizing, but because it was safer than looking at him. They used to sit here together.
Before Isla.
Before the yelling started. Before Cale decided love was conditional, and Elowen stopped trying to meet the conditions. Back then, he'd tuck her legs under his, run his fingers through her hair, tell her stories about dreams and futures, and building something together. Now, he came home late, talked to her like she was an unpaid intern in his life, and only noticed her when something was missing: his clean shirt, his dinner, his dominance.
Upstairs, Isla Koft, Adrai.
Shallow sound that made Elowen flinch. She stood, ignoring Cale's barely concealed eye roll, and padded upstairs to check on their daughter. The hallway smelled faintly of lavender and old paint. Isla's room was dim, a small night light casting sea animals across the walls. Elowen leaned over the bed. The little girl's cheeks were flushed, her breathing uneven. "Fever again, sweetheart," she whispered, brushing hair from her daughter's forehead. "I'm here." Isla stirred but didn't wake. Elowen glanced at the digital thermometer on the nightstand. 102.8, not terrifying but close. She sat by the bed, listening to her daughter breathe. Downstairs, Cale opened a beer. The sound of the cap hitting the counter was louder than thunder in her chest. When she came back down, Cale was already halfway through his bottle. "She okay?" he asked, not because he cared, but because he knew he had to say something. "Her fever's up again." "Then take her to the doctor. The clinic opens at 8. We don't have insurance." "That's not my fault," he snapped, then added, "You could get a job, you know." The words hit her like an icicle to the chest, sharp, cold, and unnecessary. "You asked me to stay home with Isla," she said, her voice shaking.
Yeah, well.
"Things change." He stood, down the rest of the beer, and tossed the bottle into the recycling bin with unnecessary force. It shattered. "Clean that up," he muttered, already heading upstairs. "Cale." He stopped mid-step, turned halfway, and looked at her for the first time that night. "You're exhausting." Then he was gone. That night, Elowen didn't sleep. She lay beside her daughter on a mattress that creaked with every breath. Her mind raced in a loop that had no exit. How did it get this bad? When did silence become safer than speaking? In the morning, Cale was gone. The car was gone too. No note, no text, no goodbye. Elowen dressed Isla in layers, wrapped her in blankets, and carried her 5 blocks through the freezing morning to Sagebrook Community Clinic. Her arms trembled from the weight. But she didn't stop. Isla whimpered in her ear, a soft sound of discomfort that sliced through her chest. At the clinic, she waited for 3 hours. Isla curled in her lap like a wilted flower. Cale didn't call, didn't text,
Didn't check in.
When the doctor finally saw them, he gave Isla a prescription for antibiotics and told Elowen to watch the fever. As if she hadn't been doing that all night. They walked back home in the slush and silence. Later that evening, Kale returned. Suit rumpled. Eyes tired. Smelling like someone else's perfume. "Where have you been?" Elowen asked, not accusing, just needing to know. "Work. We went to the clinic." And he grunted, pulling off his tie. "Isla needs antibiotics." He nodded, distracted. Then his gaze turned sharp. "You used the insurance card, right? We don't have one anymore, remember? You said we had to cancel it." Kale didn't respond. He opened the fridge. Closed it again. "You really expect me to cover all this forever?" he said finally. Elowen felt something shift. Not in the room, in herself. It was small, quiet, but absolute. Like a door closing softly. Never to open again. That night, after Isla fell asleep, Elowen sat in the kitchen with a notepad. She wrote down everything. Every time Kale yelled. Every time he disappeared. Every time he made her feel invisible. She started a file on her laptop. She labeled it Restoration Plan. She didn't know yet how she would leave. Or when. Or where they would go. But she knew this. This house. This hearth. It wasn't home anymore. And she would no longer let the cold decide who she became. The storm didn't announce itself with thunder or lightning. It crept in quietly, through the cracks in the windows, the air vents, the spaces between words never said. It was 2:11 a.m. when Isla began to cry. At first, Elowen thought it was just a dream, a sound folded into sleep. But then came the sharp, rasping cough and the small thud of her daughter kicking the wall in distress. Elowen shot up. She found Isla tangled in her blankets, flushed deep red, cheeks wet with sweat and tears. "Mommy," the little girl whimpered, barely audible. "It hurts." Elowen touched her forehead and nearly pulled her hand back. She was burning up, boiling. She grabbed the thermometer. 105.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Elowen's stomach dropped. That wasn't a fever. That was danger. "Okay? Okay, it's okay," she murmured, trying to sound calm, even though her insides were caving in. "We're going back to the clinic." She wrapped Isla in a coat over her pajamas, shoved a bottle of water, her wallet, and the insurance-less medical card into a tote bag. She dialed Kale as she pulled on her boots. Straight to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. Again. She sent a message. Then another. "It's urgent. Isla is really sick. Where are you?" No reply. Elowen looked out the window. Snow was coming down hard now, thick and fast like ash falling from heaven. She had no car. No neighbors she trusted. No time. The clinic was closed. Of course it was. It was a weekend. She stood outside the locked doors, Isla moaning in her arms, snow soaking her shoes. Then she remembered the urgent care center across town. Too far to walk. She pulled out her phone and ordered a rideshare. Estimated wait, 22 minutes. She looked down at her daughter. Isla's eyes were fluttering, her lips dry. "Just hold on, baby," she whispered, pacing back and forth under the awning. "Hold on." The car finally came, and the driver, a man in his 50s with tired eyes, didn't say much, just drove fast once he saw Elowen's face. The emergency room was fluorescent and freezing. Isla was seen quickly, thank God. The nurses hooked her to fluids, stripped her layers, and placed cool cloths over her head. The doctor, young, kind, calm, told Elowen, "Her fever's peaking, but we've got her stabilized. You did the right thing bringing her in when you did. It was close." Elowen collapsed into a plastic chair. It was close. And Kale still hadn't replied. The hours crawled by.
Isla slipped.
Small and pale under a thin hospital blanket. Elowen held her hand. She didn't cry. Not yet. She felt like a shell holding on just to keep from cracking. Her phone buzzed.
Kale.
Didn't see her calls. "I'm out. What's going on?" She stared at the message like it was written in a foreign language. Didn't see her calls? Isla had almost been admitted for heat stroke, and all he had was 4 words and a shrug. She didn't answer. Not until 7:48 a.m., when the doctor cleared them for release. Cale wasn't at home. There were no signs he'd been back. The couch was still crumpled. His shoes still gone. No groceries in the fridge. Just the faint smell of cologne mixed with exhaustion and disappointment. Elowen tucked Isla into bed, kissed her flushed cheek, and sat beside her, finally allowing the tears to come. Where had he gone? Why had he stopped pretending? She knew, deep down, that this wasn't new. Cale had been gone long before he physically walked out the door. He had vanished from their marriage, from her heart, from any responsibility he once promised to share. But this was betrayal. At noon, the front door creaked. Elowen looked up from the kitchen table, eyes dry, body still trembling from lack of sleep. Cale walked in, tossing his keys on the counter, acting like he had just stepped out for coffee. "Hey," he said casually. "Where were you?" Her voice cracked. He shrugged. "With friends. Crashed at Nate's place." "I called you. Texted." Isla had a 105 fever. He looked up then. A brief flicker of something, guilt? Annoyance? "She's fine now, right? You didn't come home. You didn't call. You didn't care."
He scoffed.
"Don't be dramatic. She gets sick all the time. It's not like she was dying." That broke something in her. "She could have been," Elowen said, her voice rising for the first time in weeks. "And you wouldn't have known. You would have just slept through it in someone else's bed." Cale's face darkened. "Watch your tone. Or what? You'll ignore me harder. You're always so damn emotional." This is why I stopped talking to you." The words landed like a slap. And then it was quiet. Not the passive silence they'd lived in for years. This was loaded silence. The kind before something explodes. That night, Elowen stood in the shower with the water on full blast, steam curling around her like fog. She stared at the tiles and realized she didn't know how many there were. She had stopped noticing the details of her own life. She was disappearing.
Piece by piece.
And no one, not even Cale, was trying to stop it. She waited until Isla was fast asleep, then pulled out her laptop. The file she started days ago, restoration plan, glowed on the screen. She added more entries. February 18th, abandoned us during emergency. Did not respond to 6 calls. For messages over 5 hours. Dismissed daughters near hospitalization. Implied I was being dramatic. She saved screenshots. Cale's vague replies. Her unanswered messages. His bank withdrawals at 3 a.m. from somewhere called the Glass Tap. She wasn't sure what a lawyer would make of it yet, but she was building something. A trail of truth. A defense. A declaration. "You're not leaving," Cale had once said. "You've got no job, no money, no place to go." He was wrong. She had purpose now. She was leaving not just for herself, but for Isla. Her daughter would not grow up thinking this was what love looked like. At 3:27 a.m., Elowen turned off the laptop. She sat by the window and watched the wind sweep through the backyard. Snowflakes tumbled like ghosts across the porch. The storm had passed, but it had left something behind. Resolve. Elowen Maris had never thought of herself as strategic. She was a nurturer, a fixer, a peacekeeper. The kind of woman who said sorry even when someone else bumped into her.
But now,
as she sat at the kitchen table surrounded by opened envelopes, browser tabs, and a freshly brewed pot of strong coffee, Elowen realized something. Peacekeeping had never kept her safe. It had only made her disappear. Cale had stayed out 3 nights in a row now. No explanations. No apologies. Not even the courtesy of a lie. On the rare occasions he returned home, it was only to shower, grab clean clothes, or bark something about Isla being too loud while he was trying to sleep. She had stopped asking where he went. He had stopped pretending to care. But Isla noticed. "Mommy, why doesn't Daddy eat dinner with us anymore?" "He's just busy, sweetheart. But he never hugs me goodnight." "I'll hug you twice as much, okay?" It was a promise Elowen kept. Every night, even when her arms ached from folding laundry, scrubbing dishes, and carrying worry like a second child. She wasn't sure when the idea started forming, maybe in that ER waiting room, maybe the moment Kale called her exhausting. But now it had grown roots. She was going to leave, not in fear, not in shame, but with evidence, with intention, with fireproof armor. She began documenting everything. She downloaded a voice recorder app and turned it on whenever Kale spoke to her. She took photos of Isla's bruised knees, not because Kale caused them, but because one day she might need to prove she took care of her. She started going through their joint bank account and tracking the transfers he made to bars, hotels, strange apps she didn't recognize. She printed screenshots,
Dated them.
labeled each folder. Emotional neglect, financial abandonment, verbal harm. She looked up lawyers offering free consultations. Most of them wouldn't talk unless she already had a separation agreement. She didn't. Not yet. But she would. The hardest part wasn't planning. It was pretending. Pretending everything was fine so Isla wouldn't be scared. Pretending to laugh at cartoons, to smile at teachers during pickup, to act like her heart wasn't a dried-up matchbox waiting to ignite. Sometimes Kale would come home and act like nothing was wrong. "You're still here," he'd say casually, like she was just an extra tenant in his life. "You want me to go?" she asked once. He chuckled. "Like you could afford to." And there it was, the arrogance that fueled him. The belief that she needed him. That she had no power. He wasn't completely wrong. She had no income, no lawyer, no backup plan. But what she did have? A daughter.
A drive.
And a timeline. 3 weeks into her plan, something unexpected happened. Kale came home with flowers. They were wilted from the grocery store, still wrapped in plastic. But Isla squealed when she saw them. "Did you bring those for Mommy?" "Yeah," Kale replied with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Guess I did." He handed them over like a bribe. Elowen took them without a word. Later, he brought home takeout, sat at the table, asked Isla about her day. He was trying, or at least pretending to. And for a fleeting moment, Elowen wondered if he knew. That night, she found a note in her bag. "If you're planning something, just remember, I don't lose. Ever."
K.
It wasn't signed. It didn't have to be. The penmanship was unmistakable. Sharp. Slanted. Like him. She stared at it for a long time, her fingers trembling.
So he did know.
Or suspect. Either way, the game had changed. This wasn't about escaping a broken marriage anymore. It was about surviving a custody war. The next day, she reached out to Jordan Eastwick, a woman she'd found through a single mother's legal support group online. Jordan was a former attorney turned consultant for women in domestic custody battles. She offered Elowen a free call. "Start gathering proof of primary care," Jordan said. "Doctor visits, school pickups, meals, bedtime routines." "That's all me," Elowen replied.
Good.
"Record it. Write it down. Make it indisputable. Courts like proof. What if he tries to take her? What if he lies?" Jordan's voice was calm but firm. "You be louder. Through paper, not panic. Documentation wins custody, not tears." That night, Elowen filled an entire journal. She wrote down every time Isla had a nightmare and crawled into her bed. Every time she packed lunch, braided hair, cleaned up a mess, managed a meltdown. She documented Isla's food allergies, her favorite books, the way she hated the dark unless the turtle night light was on. It wasn't just for the court. It was a love letter to her child. A way to prove, even if no one else saw it, that she had been there. Fully. Always. Kale's behavior grew erratic. One day, he was charming. He made pancakes. Bought Isla a new dollhouse. The next, he was cold. Slamming doors. Grumbling under his breath about how Isla was too needy, how Elowen turned her into a brat. "You're raising her to be weak," he snapped one night. "No," Elowen shot back. "I'm raising her to be safe." Kale paused. Narrowed his eyes. "Safe from what?" "Me. If the shoe fits." He didn't speak to her for 3 days after that. It was the best 3 days she'd had in months. And then came the breaking point. A Thursday evening. Rain slashed against the windows like knives. Cale came home drunk. Not buzzed. Not tipsy.
Drunk.
Isla was coloring on the living room floor. She saw him stumble in and asked cheerfully, "Daddy, can I show you my drawing?" "Not now," he slurred, waving her off. "Go play somewhere else." Elowen stepped between them. "Go to your room, Isla. Mommy will come tuck you in soon." When Isla disappeared down the hall, Cale turned. "Don't tell me how to talk to my kid. Then talk to her like you're her parent, not a barfly." He grabbed her wrist. It wasn't hard, but it was enough. Enough for her to record it. Enough for her to mark the page. Enough to end this chapter of her life. That weekend, she met with Jordan in person. They sat in a cafe, papers spread across the table like war plans. "You have what you need," Jordan said, flipping through the binder Elowen had created. Photos, statements, medical records, activity logs. "Now what?" Elowen asked. "Now we file. And we make it official. And if he fights me, then he'll lose." Elowen wanted to believe that.
Truly.
But Cale had always been good at breaking things before she could build them. This time, she'd build something unbreakable. That night, she tucked Isla into bed, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "We're almost free." The little girl smiled sleepily. "Free like the birds at Grandma's?" "Exactly like that." Elowen stood by the window after Isla fell asleep. The night was still. Too still. But the storm was coming. And this time she was ready. The courthouse in Wister Hollow looked nothing like the ones Elowen had seen in movies. It wasn't grand. It didn't have towering marble columns or a flag waving nobly in the wind. It was beige and tired, with flickering fluorescent lights and the faint smell of mildew and cold coffee. But for Elowen Maris, it may as well have been a battlefield. She sat on the wooden bench outside Family Courtroom B, clutching her worn-out leather folder like it was armor. Inside were carefully labeled tabs. Custody logs, communication records, medical bills, financial abandonment. Jordan Eastwick had helped her assemble it, each page a brick in the wall she was building to protect her daughter. She checked the time.
9:02 morgens.
Her court-appointed attorney was late. She took a deep breath. "You're doing this for Isla. For a future that doesn't smell like whiskey and regret." The courtroom door creaked open. "Ms. Maris?" She stood, turned, then blinked. The man walking toward her looked vaguely familiar. Dark suit. Tired but intelligent eyes. A half-day's stubble and an expression carved from quiet storms. He extended a hand. "There in vain. I'll be representing you today." Her heart stuttered.
"Wait."
"You're the lawyer from the hospital."
A pause.
Then recognition sparked behind his eyes. "You're the mother with the fevered kid, Elowen." She nodded slowly. "I didn't know you were court-appointed." "I do private work too," he said. "But I rotate through family court every quarter." Apparently, fate likes to be dramatic. She cracked a small smile for the first time that day. "I could use some drama on my side, honestly." Inside the courtroom, Cale was already seated, arms crossed, jaw tight. He wore a sharp gray suit that didn't match the bags under his eyes or the swollen bruise beneath his collarbone. Elowen wondered idly if Zara had started fighting back too. Theron leaned in as they approached the table. He brought counsel. "Someone local. We're not here for the full hearing yet, but it's a good sign he's taking this seriously." "Is that good?" she whispered. "It's good that he sees you as a threat." The judge was an older woman named Marla Kensington, with kind eyes and a sharp tongue. She read through the preliminary file, flipped through Elowen's documentation, and raised an eyebrow at the first financial tab. "Ms. Maris, you've documented expenditures, school pickups, medical events, and logged 86% of child-related care in the last 6 months. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And Mr. Draven?" The judge turned. "You contest this?" Cale's lawyer, a man named Morrison, cleared his throat. "My client acknowledges Ms. Maris has played a significant role." but he believes joint custody is in the best interest of the child. And he's requesting primary residence? Yes, Your Honor. Elowen's heart dropped. Cale didn't even flinch. Theron stood, buttoning his suit jacket. Your Honor, Mr. Draven has no documented caregiving history in the past 4 months. No overnight medical supervision. No school involvement. No evidence of emotional bonding. We'll be submitting a full response at the next hearing, but for now, we request temporary sole custody remain with Ms. Maris until a full review. The judge raised an eyebrow again. I'll grant temporary residential custody to the mother pending review. Full hearing in 60 days. I'd also like to recommend mediation before trial. Perhaps both parties can find clarity. Cale scoffed under his breath. Fat chance. Outside, Elowen exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her knees were shaking. Her fingers were numb. You did great in there, Theron said, walking beside her down the steps. I didn't say much. You didn't have to. Your document screamed for you. She let out a laugh. Short and raw. I'm not used to people fighting for me. Theron slowed, turning toward her. You fought for yourself. That's why I took this case. Because of the binder? Because of the woman in the hospital who held her daughter like she was made of porcelain and fire. There was silence between them. Not uncomfortable, just full. Can I ask you something personal? Elowen said softly. Depends how personal. You don't wear a ring. He looked down at his hand, amused. Is that a question? You helped me that night. You didn't have to. You even gave me your card. Why? He shrugged, thoughtful. Because I've seen too many people give up. You didn't. I almost did. Almost isn't the same as actually. A beat. Then, and you? He looked at her. Steady. I don't give up on the right cases. Or the right people. They stood in silence for another moment before Elowen asked, Will you still be handling my case for the next hearing? If you'll let me. Even if the state doesn't pay you for all those hours? He smirked. You think I'm in this for the money? Most lawyers are. Then I'm not most lawyers. That night, Elowen sat at the kitchen table, Isla asleep upstairs, a mug of reheated coffee in hand. She opened her laptop. Opened the restoration plan. Added a new tab. Legal allies. Theron Vane, date of appearance, officially 03/22. Unofficially, the night he stopped to help a stranger. She stared at the glowing screen, then closed the laptop and looked around the house. The walls were still stained with memories she wanted to erase. But tonight, for the first time, it didn't feel like a prison. It felt like a launching pad. The first package Elowen ever shipped from her dining room table was wrapped in leftover tissue paper from Isla's birthday party and sealed with a roll of masking tape she'd borrowed from a neighbor. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even neat. But it was hers. Her store, Hearthlight Home, was finally open, at least digitally. An online corner of the internet selling curated home essentials. Bamboo dish racks, ceramic mugs, scentless candles, reusable storage bins. Each item picked with the same care she once gave to decorating Isla's nursery before everything unraveled. She had posted a single product video the night before, her hands arranging a minimalist spice organizer while soft piano music played in the background. The lighting was uneven, the captions a bit slow. But by morning, it had 148 views. And one order. Not much. But it was more than she had yesterday.
6 Uhr morgens.
Elowen's alarm buzzed softly. She was already awake. Isla had coughed through the night again, waking 3 separate times. Her daughter's fever had broken days ago, but her lungs still seemed to rattle like wind against old shutters. Each time Isla stirred, Elowen would climb out of her thin blanket, check her forehead, whisper reassurances, and crawl back into bed, only to lie there, staring at the ceiling. By sunrise, her body ached with exhaustion, but her fingers itched to move. She had packages to prepare, orders to update, and new content to shoot for the next wave of products. She tiptoed to the living room, where boxes lined the wall like quiet soldiers. Recycled shipping cartons from neighbors, carefully labeled with Sharpie, wooden hangers, glass meal prep sets, refillable soap bottles. She'd traded her pride for product, sold her old jewelry, pawned a watch her mother gave her for her wedding, borrowed $300 from her old college roommate who ran an Etsy shop in Austin. And now here it was, stacked against walls, lined across the floor, her life in cardboard. Isla padded into the room, rubbing her eyes. "Is it morning already?" she asked, voice croaky. "Barely, baby. Go lie on the couch. I'll make your oatmeal soon." The little girl curled up under a blanket on the sofa, clutching her stuffed llama. "You working again?" she asked. "Just a little. Mommy's almost done." Isla didn't complain. She never did. That was the part that hurt the most. Elowen sealed the last box, wiped her brow, and texted the local courier she found through a Facebook group. His name was Dean. He was 71, retired, and delivered for single moms like her because it felt good to be useful. At 10:30 a.m., she went live. Her hands shook as she positioned the camera stand, just a cheap bendable tripod clipped to an upside-down mug, and adjusted the natural light streaming through the window. "Hi, everyone," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "My name's Elowen, and this is Hearthlight Home." She held up a cotton linen basket, demonstrated how it collapsed and unfolded, and spoke about its eco-fabric and minimalist design. For 15 minutes, she performed, smiling, gesturing, pretending she wasn't functioning on 2 hours of sleep and half a banana. By the time she ended the live stream, her cheeks hurt from forced grins. She had 2 new orders. That night, after Isla went to sleep, Elowen sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by scissors, tape, and shipping labels. She played soft instrumental music to keep her awake. Her eyes felt like sandpaper. Her spine creaked. Her wrists ached. But she kept going. One order after another. One name. One address. One fragile hope, sealed and shipped. Around midnight, she opened her inbox. Subject: legal hearing date confirmed, custody review. The hearing was 3 weeks away. Cale had filed a formal challenge. He was now requesting full custody and unrestricted parental access. Elowen stared at the words until they blurred. She reread them. Then she stood up. She didn't cry. She went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, looked in the mirror, and said, "He won't win." 2 days later, she received a direct message on Hearthlight's business page.
Hey.
"You're the girl from the hospital, right?" She hesitated. The profile picture was vague. The name generic. Then a follow-up came. "Theron. From Family Court. Just wanted to say your last video popped up in my feed. You've got a gift." She smiled for the first time in hours. "You stalking your clients now?" she replied. "Only the ones brave enough to start something new." "Well, thanks. If you ever need help navigating taxes or business structure stuff, let me know. I have a boring brother who does spreadsheets for fun." "I just might." Later that week, Elowen was restocking a shelf when Isla came running in. "Mommy." The screen's buzzing. Elowen checked her dashboard. One of her videos had gone semi-viral. 20,000 views. 400 likes. Dozens of comments. She scrolled through them. "Your hands are so calm and graceful. I want to live in a house like yours. Thank you for the peace you bring with these videos. I was having a bad day, but this helped." Elowen covered her mouth. Tears came, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming feeling of being seen. Not as a wife, not as a failure, not as a victim, but as herself. That night, Cale showed up, unannounced, uninvited. She heard his car pull into the driveway, heard the sharp slam of the door. She opened it before he could knock. "You can't just show up here. I'm still her father. You gave up that right the night you disappeared when she had a 105-degree fever." He stepped closer. Too close. "You think you're going to win custody because of a few cute videos and your charity case lawyer?" "No," she said quietly. "I'm going to win because I never left her. Because I'm the one who stayed. Who cleaned vomit off the sheets. who stayed up during seizures, who rocked her to sleep every night while you were too busy pretending to be single. Kale's face twisted.
Gerfel, él.
You're getting bold. No, she said, stepping back inside. I'm getting free. She shut the door before he could respond. That night, she didn't sleep. Not from anxiety, but from energy. She packed more boxes, answered comments, made plans for a product bundle. She was tired, but not broken. At 2 a.m., Darren texted her. Just checking in. Everything okay? She stared at the screen, fingers hovering. Then she typed,
I'm scared.
but I'm also ready. That's the perfect place to start. The first time Elowen saw Celine Vaughn in the daylight, she was surprised by how ordinary she looked. Not ugly. Not particularly stunning either. Just human. Celine stood in front of Hearthlight's small display table at the Saturday artisan market, fingering a linen table runner with far too much interest. Her long beige coat looked like something lifted from a corporate catalog. Her lips were painted in a color Elowen might have worn once, when she still believed in date nights and second chances. Elowen almost didn't recognize her until Celine looked up and smirked. That smirk said everything. She knew. She'd come with a purpose. You're doing well, Celine said, brushing non-existent lint off the runner. Better than I expected, honestly. Elowen folded a cardboard box with controlled grace. If you're here to shop, I suggest the soap dishes. They're very forgiving. Celine laughed lightly. Still got that sharp edge, huh? I see why Kale couldn't handle you. Elowen didn't flinch.
No.
He couldn't handle having a woman who didn't kneel. That wiped the smile off Celine's face for a second, but only a second. Relax. I didn't come to fight, she said, leaning forward. I came to make you an offer. I'm not interested in whatever you're selling. Oh, I think you'll want to hear this. Elowen glanced at the two customers still browsing her shelf of foldable baskets, then took a slow step around the display to stand in front of Celine, arms crossed. 1 minute. That's all you get. Celine didn't blink. Kale's not going to stop. He wants full custody, he wants to win. And when men like him want something, they tend to get it. You know this. Deep down. Elowen said nothing. But I'm offering you a way out. A comfortable one. Celine reached into her designer tote and pulled out a crisp white envelope. Elowen didn't take it. There's $25,000 in there, Celine said, smiling. Enough to move, restart, build your little brand somewhere else. You and Isla get a new life. Kale gets his clean slate image back. Elowen blinked. Slowly. You're trying to bribe me to give up my daughter? It's not a bribe. It's a solution. A solution for who? Everyone, Elowen. You don't really think Kale will be forced to give her up, do you? The courts favor stability. He has a job, a house, clean records. You're the one starting over. Elowen leaned in. You know what the difference is between Kale and me? Celine raised an eyebrow. I don't run when things get hard. She snatched the envelope, tore it open, and dumped the bills on the table, where the wind picked up a few 20s and scattered them across the pavement like dry leaves. Celine gasped. Are you insane? No, Elowen said. But I'm done being insulted. Celine stormed off. People stared. Elowen didn't care. She knelt, picked up the money, folded it, and stuffed it into a donation box she'd brought for a local women's shelter. Then she turned to the next customer and smiled. Hi there. Interested in our zero-waste kitchen bundle? Later that night, Elowen sat at her kitchen table replaying the interaction in her mind. She half expected to feel regret, but she didn't. She felt awake, sharp, grounded. She texted Theron. Does it count as witness intimidation if your ex's girlfriend shows up and tries to buy your child for $25K? His response came back instantly. Only if you didn't record it. Tell me you did.
No.
But I did scatter the money in public like a scene from a bad movie. I'm both horrified and impressed. That makes two of us. He called a few minutes later. Elowen, he said softly. If she contacts you again, we file a report. It's not worth it. It is. because it shows Kale's willing to use people to manipulate the outcome. It proves coercion. That's not just shady, it's illegal. She sighed. I'm just tired. I know. But you're also winning. It doesn't feel like it. That's how you know it's real. The next day, Celine posted a photo online, Kale holding her waist at some rooftop bar. The caption read, "Stronger together. Family is more than blood." The comments were nauseating. Elowen didn't respond. She posted a new product video instead. It got 23,000 views in 24 hours. That week, Hearth lights sold out of 4 items. A small online influencer reposted one of her clips. And suddenly she was getting emails from organizers asking if she'd like to do local pop-ups. Kale must have noticed. He started texting again. "You've got Isla turning into a little TikTok star, huh? Hope you're not profiting off her face without my consent. We should talk, real talk. Let's make a deal." She ignored everyone. Let him boil in his silence. Let him sweat while she built something real. And then, as if summoned by his own ego, Kale showed up again. This time unshaven. Sleeves rolled up. Trying to look like the dad who's just trying. "We need to be adults about this," he said at the door. "Isla deserves 2 parents. She deserves stability. You've never offered her that." "I could. If we stopped fighting." "You mean if I surrendered?" "Don't be dramatic, Elle." She laughed, short and bitter. "You tried to steal my child through the courts. You sent your girlfriend to throw cash in my face. You abandoned Isla in a hospital. And now you want peace." He stepped closer.
What do you want, then? To ruin me?
"No," she whispered. "I want to raise my daughter without fear." She shut the door. He didn't knock again. That night, as Isla slept, Elowen recorded a new voice memo. February 26th, Celine Vaughn appeared in person, offered $25,000 in exchange for custody surrender. Witnesses at market. Event documented in donations log. She added it to the digital folder, labeled court evidence. She didn't cry. She didn't crumble. She simply prepared. Because real strength isn't in shouting. It's in the quiet resolve to never be bought. Celine Vaughn wasn't used to being second. She was used to perfect table reservations, quick callbacks, "You're the only one" texts. Her life was curated in Instagram-ready snapshots, brunch aesthetics, filtered sunsets, white wine on rooftops. But something had shifted. Kale's silence no longer felt sexy. It felt strategic. His excuses had become lazy. His compliments hollow. And the look in his eyes when she mentioned Elowen? It was the same look a gambler gives a table he just lost everything on. It started with a missed dinner. Then, forgot to call. Then the classic, "I fell asleep." But Kale never used to fall asleep without sending a selfie from bed. That was his thing, constant control. Owning the narrative. Until the night Celine drove by his apartment and saw a light on that shouldn't have been. She knocked. No answer. She called. Voicemail. She waited. At 11:53 p.m., a girl walked out. Young. Maybe 23. Glossy hair. Laughing into her phone. Wearing Kale's old college hoodie.
Celine didn't speak.
Didn't shout. She just took a picture from her car and drove home. Then she opened a bottle of Cabernet and stared at it all night. 3 days later, she showed up at Kale's office. Unannounced. He was not pleased. "You can't just come here, Celine. I have meetings." "You also had a hoodie to return, apparently." He froze. "Don't play dumb. I saw her. It's not what it looked like." "Then explain it." "We're not, Celine. We're not exclusive, remember?" She blinked. "Excuse me? You said we were keeping things casual. No pressure." "That was before I bribed your ex with $25,000 for you. Which, by the way, I never asked you to do." He turned back to his desk like that closed the conversation. "You're unbelievable," Celine hissed. "You said you were serious about Isla, about us, about rebuilding." "I am. I have options." "So did I. And I chose you." "Maybe that was your mistake." Celine stared at him. No more smirks, no more games. Just the hollow clarity of a woman who realized she'd been a placeholder. You'll never be satisfied, Kale. Not with her. Not with me. Not even with Isla. You don't know what I want. I know you'd rather destroy people than admit you're not enough. She walked out. And this time, he didn't call. Celine sent the photo to Elowen 2 days later. No message. Just the image. Kale's new girl, his hoodie, the timestamp. She didn't expect a thank you. She didn't even expect a reply. But she needed someone else to know she wasn't the only fool. Elowen saw the message while restocking soap trays. She stared at the image for a long time, not because it surprised her, but because it didn't. Then she deleted it. Kale's betrayal had lost its power. She had stopped bleeding from his wounds. The next day, Theron knocked on her studio door with court papers in hand. New development, he said. Kale's lawyer withdrew. Why? Conflict of interest. Something about undisclosed behavior. Elowen raised an eyebrow. That vague? Rumor is his attorney's niece was the girl in the photo. Elowen nearly dropped the box in her hands. You're kidding. Wish I were. She laughed. Really laughed for the first time in what felt like years. So, what now? He's filing pro se for now. Representing himself. Is that good or bad?
Good.
He's arrogant. He'll implode. And Celine? Theron smirked. Filed a complaint. Allegedly told the bar she'd testify about attempted coercion and interference in a custody case. Why would she do that? Because it's the one thing Kale didn't expect, for someone to stop protecting him. Kale called that night. Elowen didn't answer. He left a voicemail.
Hey.
Just wondering if we can talk. I think some wires got crossed. I want to start over. Not with you and me. I mean with parenting. I miss Isla. I know I messed up. Just, let's meet halfway. We owe her that.
Delete.
Next message. You're really not going to answer me? After everything I did for you? You'd be nowhere without me. Selling candles like a hobbyist. Raising a sick kid in a shoebox. You think you're better than me now.
Delete.
Next message. You'll regret this, Sel.
Delete.
She blocked his number. Then she tucked Isla in with a story about fireflies and strong little girls who never stopped glowing, no matter how dark the forest got. The next morning, her inbox held 2 messages. One from Celine. Tell your lawyer I'm ready to talk. The other from a judge's clerk. Custody hearing confirmed. 9 a.m. Family Courtroom C. Worcester Hollow County Courthouse. March 28th. Elowen marked the calendar with a red pen, then circled it.
Twice.
Elowen hadn't meant to fall asleep. It had been a long day of packing orders, editing product photos, and trying to pretend she wasn't counting down the days to the custody hearing like a soldier waiting for battle. The soft hum of the rain outside, the faint glow of the kitchen light, and Isla's warm little body curled beside her on the couch. Somewhere in the middle of it all, she'd drifted off. She woke to the sound of the front door creaking open. Her eyes snapped open. At first, she thought she was dreaming, some leftover fog of a nightmare. But then came the unmistakable shuffle of wet shoes on tile, the rush of cold air, the heavy scent of alcohol and desperation. She sat bolt upright. And there he was.
Kale.
Soaking wet.
Pale.
Eyes ringed with red. And, in his left hand, an old duffel bag. What the hell are you doing here? Elowen said, rising slowly, shielding Isla with her arm. Kale didn't answer right away. He looked at her like a man staring at something he used to own but couldn't afford anymore. She's coming with me. You're out of your mind. She's my daughter. Not tonight, she's not. Kale stepped forward. You don't get to decide that. Actually, I do. Elowen shot back. Temporary custody is mine. That's what the court said. That's what the papers say. You don't get to show up at midnight, drunk, and try to kidnap her. From the couch, Isla stirred.
Groggy.
Mama? Go back to sleep, baby. Elowen whispered. But Kale moved faster. He dropped the bag, reached over the back of the couch, and grabbed Isla by the arm. Let her go. Elowen screamed. Isla cried out, squirming, terrified. Kale tugged harder. She's my daughter. I'm taking her somewhere safe. She is safe. Here. With me. Just then.
Let go.
Of the child. The voice came sharp, clear, and filled the room like lightning. Kale froze. Theron stood in the open doorway, rain dripping from the shoulders of his coat, phone still recording in his hand. I'm recording. I've got the time, the entry, the assault, and now attempted parental abduction. Keep going, Kale. You're stacking charges. Kale's hand trembled. Isla wailed. Let her go, Theron repeated, more quietly now. Or you won't see her again, even through supervised visitation. Kale looked down at Isla, who was now clawing at his hand, sobbing uncontrollably. He released her. Isla ran straight into Elowen's arms. Kale took 2 steps back, breathing hard, his face contorted, somewhere between fury and shame. This isn't over, he hissed. Theron stepped inside, blocking the path to Elowen and Isla. Yes, it is. Kale looked between them, his ex-wife clutching their daughter, his former lawyer standing in his way, and realized the war he thought he was winning had already ended. He grabbed the soaked duffel, stumbled out the door, and disappeared into the rain. Theron shut the door, locked it, then double-locked it. He turned and looked at Elowen. Are you okay? Elowen was still shaking, clutching Isla tight against her chest. I don't know. It's over now. You're safe. She's safe.
Elowen nodded, blinking fast.
Thank you. How did you know to come? Theron pulled out his phone and showed her. Kale posted something online earlier. A rant about being robbed of fatherhood. It set off alarms. I knew he'd do something reckless. I just didn't know how soon. He knelt down beside Isla. Hey, sweetheart. You're okay. You're safe now, all right? I promise. Isla sniffled, looking at him with wide, glassy eyes. You stopped him. I did. And no one's ever going to scare you like that again. Later that night, Elowen tucked Isla into bed. It took longer than usual. Her daughter clung to her, fingers gripping the hem of her sleeve, as if afraid she'd vanish if she let go. When Isla finally drifted into a fitful sleep, Elowen walked into the kitchen to find Theron still there, sitting at the table, reviewing footage from his phone. Did you get enough of it? She asked softly. Every second. Will it help in court? Elowen, he said, looking up. It'll bury him. She let out a slow breath, then sat across from him. I feel like I'm breaking in 100 directions. You're not breaking, he said. You're bending. That's different. Feels the same. It's not. He reached across the table, fingers grazing hers. People who break don't keep fighting. You haven't stopped. They sat like that for a long moment, no words. Just the quiet hum of the storm outside and the echo of what could have happened if he hadn't shown up. Before he left, Theron handed her a printed report. Emergency filing. Temporary restraining order against Kale. We'll bring this to the judge first thing Monday. You think he'll be arrested? If he's not already. He paused at the door. You should sleep. Easier said than done. Then rest knowing this. He crossed a line tonight. And lines have consequences. That night, Elowen sat beside Isla's bed, stroking her hair. She wasn't crying anymore. She wasn't afraid. She was just done. Done living in fear. Done feeling small. Done thinking that being strong meant being silent. The rain cleared by morning, and so did Elowen's doubts. Elowen didn't remember fainting. She remembered trying to finish the morning's shipping labels. She remembered Isla's cereal spilling all over the counter. She remembered seeing Theron's name light up her phone screen. And then nothing. Just the sound of Isla's small voice screaming her name as the floor rushed up to meet her. When she opened her eyes again, the world was sterile white and humming. Hospital. Her head throbbed. Her lips were dry. Her arm ached where N4 was taped down. Theron sat slumped in the chair next to her, elbows on knees, still wearing the same dress shirt from the night before. There were rings under his eyes and a cup of untouched coffee in his hand. You scared the hell out of me, he said when he saw her stir. What happened? You collapsed in your kitchen. Isla called 911. Elowen's breath caught. She saw. She was incredible, he said gently. Smart.
Calm.
Gave them your address. Sat next to you until the ambulance arrived. She didn't leave your side. Tears pooled at the corners of Elowen's eyes. She shouldn't have had to. Theron leaned closer, speaking softly. You've been carrying too much for too long. Your body said, enough. She turned her head toward the ceiling. I don't have time to fall apart. No one ever does, he replied. But we do it anyway. The doctor came in an hour later. You're severely dehydrated. Your blood pressure was dangerously low. We ran tests. Your body's exhausted, plain and simple. So I'm not dying, she joked weakly. Not today. But if you keep pushing yourself this hard, we'll be having this conversation again soon, and next time might be worse. Elowen nodded, humiliated. What now? You rest. You stop trying to be everything at once, and you accept help. That means friends, family, even, he looked toward Theron, overly concerned lawyers. Theron lifted a hand.
Guilty.
The doctor smiled.
Good.
Then she's in capable hands. Isla came later that afternoon, holding a balloon with a shaky drawing of a heart on it. She was quiet, but when Elowen hugged her, she didn't let go for a full minute. You fell down, Mama, she said into her shoulder. I know, baby. But I'm okay now. Don't fall again. I won't. Elowen kissed her forehead and meant every word. Later that evening, Theron drove Elowen and Isla back to their apartment. The house felt different now, smaller, somehow. Not because it had changed, but because she had. The silence settled heavy. She sat on the edge of her bed while Isla napped in the next room. Theron leaned against the wall near the door, watching her carefully. I feel stupid, she murmured. You shouldn't. I broke down. No, he said gently. You finally let go. Elowen looked up, eyes tired but unguarded. Why are you still here, Theron? Because I don't want to be anywhere else. Her chest tightened. I'm a mess. You're human. He crossed the room slowly and sat next to her. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. I mean it. Elowen stared at the floor, then at her hands, then at him.
I'm scared, Theron.
So am I, he admitted. And that truth, that he didn't hide behind calmness or legal jargon, was what broke the dam inside her. She leaned into him, and for the first time in months, she let someone hold her without apology. Over the next few days, Elowen rested. Really rested. Theron took over deliveries and legal paperwork. Isla spent more time laughing. The house began to feel like a home again, not a bunker. Elowen still woke at 3 a.m. sometimes, heart racing, ears searching for phantom footsteps at the door. But she was healing.
Slowly. Quietly. Truly.
One morning, she sat outside on the small back porch, coffee in hand, watching the sun climb up through the trees. Theron walked out, still in pajama pants, holding Isla's empty cereal bowl. She ate 3 bites, then declared war on raisins. Elowen smiled. They're very divisive. She gets that from you.
Oh.
So now you're a breakfast critic. I've always been a man of many skills. She looked at him for a long moment. Theron? Yeah. What if I never get back to the person I used to be? He leaned against the railing, eyes soft. Then you become someone better. That afternoon, a package arrived at the door. No return address. Inside, a manila folder. No note. Just photos. Kale at bars. With different women. One of them driving with Isla in the back seat, clearly ignoring traffic laws. Elowen's hands shook. Theron opened the last photo. His jaw tensed. Celine, he said quietly. She sent these. Why? Because she's done being loyal to someone who threw her away. Elowen stared at the folder. This changes everything, doesn't it? It might just win you everything. That night, Elowen opened a new tab on her website and wrote a blog post. When you burn out, you begin again. I fell.
Hard.
In every way a person can fall. But I'm not ashamed. I'm grateful. Because falling is the only reason I ever stopped and looked up. This is for the women who carry too much, who cry in silence, who smile through storms. You don't have to break to be strong, but if you do, I hope you rebuild stronger than before. She clicked publish and watched the world respond. It didn't happen all at once. There was no swelling music, no grand epiphany, no clean slate. Healing for Elowen came in little things. It came in the way Isla no longer woke up screaming from dreams she didn't remember. It came in the new rhythm of her days. Meals at the table, not hunched over her laptop. Sunlight drifting through open windows, shoes left by the door, still damp from the garden. And it came most unexpectedly with laughter. Real, unfiltered, belly-deep laughter. It started the morning Isla told Theron he cut her peanut butter sandwich too ugly to eat. He raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me, madam, that is a high-level triangle formation. Triangles are scary."
Isla whispered.
"She's clearly anti-geometry," Elowen said. "You've been radicalizing her against shapes." "I do what I must." That breakfast turned into a giggle-filled mess of misshapen fruit and dramatic toasts with orange juice in plastic cups. Theron stayed for lunch that day, then dinner. And then he just kept showing up. Not as a savior. Not as a hero. Just as someone who didn't mind folding laundry while she filed orders. Someone who read stories in a different voice for each character. Someone who asked every day, "Are you okay? Really?" And waited for the real answer. One afternoon, Elowen stepped into the storefront for Hearthlight, which had been closed since her collapse. She stood in the quiet space, watching dust motes drift like falling glitter. The shelves still smelled faintly of lavender wax. There were handwritten notes from customers pinned to a corkboard near the counter. "Your candle helped me through my divorce. I light one every night and feel less alone. Thank you for your story. I feel braver just reading it." Elowen pressed a hand to her chest. She had started Hearthlight to survive. But somehow, it had helped others do the same. Later that evening, she and Theron sat on the porch, watching Isla chalk mermaids on the driveway.
Elowen si petea.
The silence between them was easy. "The court date's in 10 days, Theron said softly. "How are you feeling?" "Strangely calm. Not terrified?" "Not anymore." "That's surprising. I think I've hit emotional capacity," she said with a crooked smile. "There's just no room for fear right now." He chuckled. "You're full." "I'm full," she agreed. Then, quietly, but not empty. That night, while Isla slept, Elowen found herself standing in front of her bedroom mirror, staring at a version of herself she barely recognized. No makeup, hair messy, old hoodie. Still, something had changed. She wasn't the same woman who begged Kale to stay. She wasn't the same woman who believed her value lived in being agreeable, likable, quiet. She had weathered the storm.
And now,
like the first flowers after frost, she was blooming. Not loudly, not perfectly, but undeniably. A few days later, Theron's mother Diana invited them over for dinner. It was the first time Elowen had been in someone else's home without bracing for judgment. Diana was warmth wrapped in sarcasm. She hugged Isla like a long-lost grandchild. Fed everyone too much. Had no filter. "You're prettier than the last woman he dated," she said to Elowen over mashed potatoes. "Mom," Theron muttered. "I said what I said." Later that evening, Diana pulled Elowen aside while the kids played in the living room. "You're good for him." "I don't know about that." "No, really? I haven't seen him this soft in years. Whatever you're doing, don't stop." "Honestly, I'm not doing much." "Exactly," Diana said with a smile. "You're letting him be." That night, after Isla was asleep in the guest room, Elowen and Theron stood at the edge of the garden behind Diana's house. A soft breeze rustled the tall grass. Fireflies blinked lazily across the hedges. "This is nice," Elowen said.
Yeah.
"Simple. Safe." Theron glanced at her. "Do you still think love has to be dramatic to be real?" I used to. And now? Now I think drama is just adrenaline, she said. Love is showing up. He nodded. I'm not asking for anything big, he said gently. Not yet. I just want you to know, I'm here. No matter what happens in that courtroom. Elowen looked at him, really looked. She could see his flaws. His weariness. The way he sometimes overthinks and how he rarely lets people in. But more than that, she saw his consistency. His quiet. His strength. I know you're here, she said. And that means more than you realize. That weekend, they took the kids to the farmer's market. Isla held Bond's hand like he was her bodyguard. Theron bought Elowen sunflowers. They grilled vegetables on the patio and spilled lemonade everywhere. No one yelled. No one cried. No one walked on eggshells. It was peaceful. And when Elowen looked around at the laughter, the light, the future unfolding in front of her, she realized she didn't need a perfect life. She just needed this kind of quiet. The kind that grows after chaos. The kind that stays. The kind that blooms. Elowen had always believed that distance was measured in miles. But now, sitting on her porch with Theron just inches away, her daughter asleep upstairs, the house wrapped in twilight silence, she understood something deeper. The greatest distance was the one you built inside yourself. And lately, she'd been building again. It started small. She stopped texting Theron goodnight. Stopped sending memes midday. Started cleaning the house before he came over, like she was bracing for judgment that never came. When he offered to help with court documents, she told him she had it under control. When he offered to bring Isla to daycare, she said she had other plans. And when he asked gently if something was wrong, I'm just tired, she said. It was the safest lie in the world. The truth? She was terrified. Not of Theron, but of how easy he made everything feel. How safe. She had been safe before. Until she wasn't. One night, Theron stayed late helping Isla finish a dinosaur puzzle. When she ran off to bed squealing, he lingered by the door. You've been pulling back, he said gently. Elowen didn't meet his eyes. I've been busy. This isn't about schedules. What is it about then? You tell me. There was a beat. Then she whispered, I don't want to need anyone. Theron nodded. I get it. Do you? Yes. But I'm not asking you to need me. I'm asking you to let me care. She looked up at him then, her voice barely audible. I don't know how. He stepped closer, slowly, as if afraid she might vanish. You don't have to know. Just don't run. She didn't answer. And that silence said more than any word could. He nodded once and left. The door clicked behind him like the closing of a chapter she didn't know she was still writing. That night, Elowen lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Isla's small hand wrapped around her arm. She thought about Kale. How in the beginning, he made her feel chosen. How that choice became a cage. How loving him had turned into performing worthiness every second of the day. How, even now, sometimes, she caught herself apologizing for existing too loudly. She didn't want to feel that way again. Even with someone good. Even with someone like Theron. The next day, she buried herself in work. Candles. Orders. Packaging. A new blog post she didn't publish. She answered messages with emojis. Replied to Theron's check-in with a thumbs up. She was becoming an expert at creating invisible walls. When Diana texted, inviting her and Isla over again, she replied, another time. We're resting this weekend. That was the truth. And also not. By Saturday, Theron hadn't reached out again. And she hated how much that hurt. Because she knew she was the one who had pushed. And now, she had the quiet she'd once begged for. And yet it felt different. Not like peace, but like absence. Sunday afternoon, Elowen took Isla to the park. While Isla played on the swings, Elowen sat on a bench, watching clouds drift over the late autumn sky. A familiar voice pulled her back. Looks like Bond's best friend is taking over the slide again. Theron, standing behind her. Coffee in one hand, Bond in tow. She's unstoppable, Elowen said softly. Takes after her mom. They watched the kids laugh for a while. Finally, Elowen spoke. I've been distant.
Yeah.
Not because of you. I know. Because of me. He nodded. She turned to him, searching his expression, expecting frustration. But he just looked steady. I've spent so long trying to protect myself, she whispered. Sometimes I forget I don't have to anymore. You still do, he said. But now, you can let someone stand beside you while you do. Are you still standing? Haven't moved. They sat in silence after that. No pressure.
No declarations.
Just two people, sharing a moment that didn't demand more than it gave. That night, Elowen wrote a new journal entry. Not for the blog. Not for others. Just for herself. I pulled away because it felt safer. Because comfort started to look like a warning sign. I feared the ease of him. But the truth is, love isn't always loud. Sometimes it waits patiently, a few steps back, holding a sweater in case you get cold. And maybe that's what I need. Someone who doesn't force the door open, just waits for me to unlock it. She closed the notebook, tucked it in her nightstand, and exhaled for the first time in days. The next morning, she texted Theron. Want to come over for dinner? I'll even let you cut the sandwich however you want. He replied 1 minute later.
Deal.
But only if I get to stay for dessert too. It happened on a Tuesday. Elowen was halfway through packaging a shipment when her phone lit up with a text from a number she didn't recognize. You'll regret what you did. I'm getting her back. Her fingers froze mid-tape. She didn't need a name to know who it was.
Cale.
After weeks of silence, after his spiral, after their legal teams all but severed communication, he was back. And he was angry. Theron confirmed it a few hours later. He showed up at my office this morning, unannounced, demanding to reopen mediation. He still thinks he can win? He's unraveling Elle. He's not thinking straight, which makes him unpredictable. Elowen nodded slowly. Do we need more security? We already filed the restraining order. But I'm putting in a request for an emergency review. Just in case. Good, she said. Because something tells me he's not done. She was right. 2 days later, she came home from picking up Isla to find the garage door halfway open. That would have been odd enough. But the moment she stepped inside, she knew. Someone had been in the house. The air felt disturbed. Her kitchen drawer was slightly ajar, the one that held old photos and passport copies. Nothing stolen, just touched.
Moved.
Intentionally. Her hand shook as she dialed Theron. Stay calm. I'm on my way. Lock everything. He called the police. They found Cale's fingerprints on the back door handle. No forced entry, but trespassing nonetheless. And it violated the order. That night, as Isla slept in their bed, clutching her stuffed dinosaur with a white-knuckle grip, Elowen sat in the living room, staring at the photo she had once kept in her nightstand. Cale, Isla, and her in a fake holiday grin. She slid the photo through a paper shredder. Bit by bit.
Piece by piece.
She would not let the past keep bleeding into the present. The next morning, Elowen had the house wired. Cameras on all entrances. Motion sensors. A voice-activated recorder on her keychain. When she told Theron, he raised an eyebrow. You're preparing for something. I'm preparing for him. 3 days passed. Then it happened. It was just after sunset. Elowen had taken out the trash when she heard a car door slam in the driveway.
Cale.
He didn't knock. He kicked the door twice and then shoved it open with his shoulder, screaming her name. Isla screamed from the back room. Elowen stayed calm. She had rehearsed this. She hit record on her phone and slid it into her pocket. Cale stormed into the kitchen. You think you've won? You're a joke. You poisoned my daughter against me. Cale.
No.
You don't get to talk. You don't get to pretend you're better than me. I built everything. I worked. I paid. You were just what? Some candle-making daycare dropout. Get out of my house. You don't get to tell me what to do. You're just a bitter woman who couldn't keep her man. And now you think you can keep my daughter from me? The court already ruled on temporary custody. Temporary doesn't mean forever. I'm going to the judge with everything. Your breakdown. Your little affair with your lawyer. All of it. There is no affair.
Please.
I've seen the way he looks at you. Elowen's eyes didn't waver.
Good.
Maybe now I know what it's like to be looked at without fear. Cale's expression flickered, between rage and something darker. Then he lunged forward, slammed his fist into the kitchen counter so hard it made Isla cry out in the other room. You're going to regret this, he hissed. Not as much as you will. Then Theron's voice rang out behind him. Step away from her.
Now.
Cale turned, startled. Theron stood in the doorway, one hand gripping his phone, the other inching toward his belt where his concealed carry permit hung in a visible case. I called the police 10 minutes ago, he said. They're on their way. Cale froze. You won't get away with this. I already did, Elowen said, calm, steady. And you helped me. Cale looked confused until she tapped the voice recorder still lit on her phone screen. Everything you just said is on tape. That includes breaking and entering. Threatening me.
Threatening Isla.
Screaming in a residence, with a minor present. You built your own evidence. When the police arrived, Cale didn't struggle. He just stared at Elowen like she was a stranger. And for the first time, she realized that's exactly what she was. She was no longer the woman who excused his violence, who justified his silence, who crumbled under his storms. She was someone new, someone he could no longer touch. Later, after Isla was safe with Diana and Bon, and the police report was filed, Elowen sat outside on the porch with Theron beside her. The air smelled like rain and freedom. He's gone, she whispered. He'll stay gone now. The court hearing is in 4 days. And you just handed the judge everything they need. She looked at him, then away. He said, I poisoned Isla against him. Do you think she'll hate him? Theron's voice was gentle. She doesn't need to hate him. She'll just know the truth. And that's enough. And what if the truth hurts? Then you'll be there to hold her through it. Elowen swallowed the lump in her throat. You really think I can do this? I think you already are. That night, Elowen watched Isla sleep, one small hand clutching the hem of her blanket, her breath steady, peaceful. And she thought, this is the last time I'll have to look over my shoulder. Tomorrow, she'd meet with her lawyer. The next day, she'd walk into that courtroom. And by the end of the week, she would win. Not because she had to fight harder, but because she had learned when to stop running. The courtroom smelled like dust and old paper. Elowen sat at the plaintiff's table, palms pressed flat against her skirt, trying to calm her pulse. To her left sat Theron, a wall of quiet steel, flipping through his notes with precision. He wore a charcoal suit and a look of serene intensity, like he'd shown up not just to argue but to win. Across the aisle, Cale sat alone. His lawyer had withdrawn 2 days ago. No one else wanted the case after the police report, the trespassing footage, and the audio recording made their rounds. Cale looked like a shadow of his former self, unkempt, slumped, and yet somehow still wearing arrogance like cologne. The bailiff announced the judge. Everyone stood, and the fire began. The first 30 minutes were a flurry of legalese. Theron opened calmly, laying out the case. Elowen was Isla's primary caregiver. Cale had demonstrated aggressive, erratic behavior. The child's emotional stability depended on maintaining her current environment. Then came exhibits. Exhibit A, audio footage of the defendant's unlawful entry and verbal threats. Exhibit B, police report dated 3 days prior, confirming forced entry. Exhibit C, photograph evidence submitted anonymously, later verified, showing the defendant engaging in reckless behavior while transporting the minor. Each item hit like a drumbeat. Each one silenced the courtroom further. Cale attempted to cross-examine Elowen. He requested to speak on his own behalf. The judge allowed it. I loved her, he said. I worked. I provided. She turned our daughter against me because she couldn't handle not being the center of attention. Elowen sat quietly, not flinching. And that lawyer? Cale gestured toward Theron. He's her rebound. Of course he wants her to win. He probably writes her bedtime stories. Someone in the courtroom snorted. The judge silenced them. Theron didn't react. Because they didn't need to fight dirt with dirt. They had truth. And truth burns louder. When Elowen took the stand, her voice shook at first. But then she looked at Isla, sitting just outside the courtroom doors with Diana, drawing dinosaurs on a notepad, unaware of the war being fought for her. And suddenly, Elowen steadied. "I was afraid," she said, "for a long time. Of him. Of being alone. Of being a single mother with no roadmap. But I'm not afraid anymore." She looked at the judge. "I'm not here to punish Kale. I'm here to protect Isla. Because she deserves safety. Stability.
Joy.
Things that do not exist in chaos." She took a breath. "I'm not asking the court to make Kale disappear. I'm asking you to recognize who showed up every day to raise her. Who held her through every fever. Who taught her to tie her shoes and pronounce Brontosaurus. Who stood by her even when I was falling apart." The room was silent. Elowen's voice didn't waver. "That person was me." Theron didn't need a dramatic closing statement. He simply said, "We're not here to rewrite the past. We're here to protect the future. Let the facts guide your decision." Then he sat down and exhaled. The judge took a recess. When court resumed, the ruling was delivered in under 5 minutes. "The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Elowen Reed. Full legal and physical custody of the minor child, Isla Reed, is hereby granted to the plaintiff." Kale didn't move,
Didn't speak.
didn't even blink. The fire was over, and he was standing in the ashes, outside the courthouse. Elowen clutched the court order to her chest. Theron stood beside her, quietly waiting. She hadn't cried.
Not yet.
She didn't even realize her hands were trembling until he gently took the paper from her. "It's real," he said softly. She nodded. "It feels like I should scream, or dance, or something, or breathe." So she did. Diana appeared with Isla seconds later. The little girl ran full speed into Elowen's arms. "Did we win, Mama?" Elowen hugged her so tightly she could barely speak. "We did, baby."
Good.
"Can we get ice cream now?" Elowen laughed through her tears. "Absolutely." That night, after Isla fell asleep with chocolate on her cheeks and a paper crown from the ice cream parlor on her head, Elowen and Theron sat in the driveway under the stars. She turned to him. "I couldn't have done this without you." "You could have," he said. "But I'm honored you let me help." She smiled. "You're not going anywhere, are you?" "Only if you tell me to." "I'm not going to." He didn't say anything, just reached for her hand. And in the quiet of that night, she realized. This fire didn't destroy her. It refined her. Kale sat alone in a diner on the edge of town, nursing a cold cup of coffee that tasted like regret. The courtroom loss hit harder than he thought it would. Not because he lost custody. Not even because the judge's words still echoed in his ears. But because he realized there was no one left to blame. He had already sold his car, pawned his watch, sublet the apartment he once bragged about furnishing with bonus checks and stock options. The house was gone. Elowen had left it long ago, but the mortgage followed him like a ghost. He moved into a one-room studio with paper-thin walls and a leaky faucet that never stopped dripping. And worst of all, Zara was gone too. She left the day after the court ruling.
Didn't yell.
Didn't throw a scene. Just packed up her things, left a note on the counter, and disappeared. "I thought I knew you. I don't. And I don't want to." He hadn't heard from her since. Not a call. Not a text. Not even a blocked number. The girl who had once laughed at all his bad jokes, who had fed his ego with sugary praise, who had made him feel young and wanted again. She was just gone. He tried to find comfort in old habits.
Bars.
Backroom poker games. Flings with women who didn't ask for last names. But it was different now. He was no longer the confident executive. No longer the guy with charm and swagger and enough salary to make excuses vanish. Now, he was just a cautionary tale. A man whispered about in corners of his old gym. A subject of pity, not envy. Late one night, After his third glass of cheap whiskey, he looked up Elowen's website. Hearthlight. The banner had changed. So had the photos. And the woman smiling in them? Holding candles and her daughter's hand and laughing beside a man Cale didn't recognize but instinctively hated? She looked alive. Vibrant. Untouchable. He clicked on her latest blog post. There are moments in life when you realize survival wasn't the finish line. It was just the beginning. I've learned to bloom in the places I once broke. This is for every woman who walked away from someone who never imagined she could. Cale slammed the laptop shut, but the words lingered, like an ember in his chest. The next morning, he called his mother. She didn't answer. He called again. Finally, she picked up. What do you want, Cale? I wanted to talk. It's been 2 years. I know. Is Isla okay? That hit harder than he expected. She's with her mom. Silence. You did this to yourself, his mother said. And then the line went dead. That night, Cale sat on the floor of his empty apartment.
No te ve. No oís.
Just the hum of a broken refrigerator and the weight of every choice he'd made. He picked up an old framed photo from the bottom of a box. It was him and Elowen,
On their wedding day.
before the money, before the resentment,
Before Isla.
He didn't look cruel in the photo. Just young, hopeful, and blind. He set the photo face down, then sat in silence until the sun began to rise. For the first time in years, Cale cried. Not from anger, not from loss, but from a terrifying realization. He didn't know how to be a better man, because he had never bothered to become one. Fall slipped into winter almost unnoticed. The leaves browned, the air crisped, and Elowen found herself lighting candles in the early evenings, not for ambience, but for comfort. A warmth against the growing quiet. The custody ruling had changed everything. Or maybe it had only changed one thing, and that had been enough. She and Isla were safe. Officially. Legally. Unquestionably. But peace, it turned out, was not an instant reward. It was a slow unfolding. And now, in the hush that followed the chaos, Elowen could feel the weight she'd carried begin to settle and shift. One Saturday morning, Elowen stood in front of her bedroom mirror, buttoning the soft lavender blouse Theron had once complimented under his breath. Isla was at Diana's for the day, helping decorate sugar cookies and spill flour on every surface.
And Theron?
He was coming over. For no reason. No case.
No crisis.
No court date. Just dinner. She checked the mirror once more, then laughed to herself. You survived a custody battle, Elle, she whispered. You can survive a date. She froze, then said it again, slower.
A date.
Her heart thudded. Was that what this was? He arrived right on time, holding a pie. I baked it myself, he said. You what?
Fine.
I bought it, but I did warm it in the oven, so it technically counts. Elowen smiled, stepping aside to let him in. Welcome to my not-so-dramatic domestic life. I'll take not dramatic over courtroom chaos any day. They ate on the couch. No candlelight. No music. Just leftover soup and the occasional clink of spoons. But it felt effortless. And when the pie came out, they ended up laughing until they cried over how spectacularly he'd burned the crust. You ever think, Elowen said between laughs, that this is it? Not the grand romance. Just this. I've thought about it a lot. He said it so quietly, she almost missed it. But she didn't. And suddenly, the air between them changed. After the dishes were washed and the kitchen quiet again, Theron walked out onto the porch while Elowen poured 2 mugs of peppermint tea. When she stepped outside, he was staring up at the stars. Hands in pockets. Shoulders just a little too still. It's strange, he said. How quiet things feel now. You mean now that we're not fighting Cale every day?
Yeah.
But also, now that there's room for something else. She didn't answer. But she didn't have to. Because he turned to face her, and the silence said everything. Elle, he said gently, I've wanted to tell you something for a long time. She set down the mugs, braced herself. I didn't help you through everything because I wanted something in return. I helped because I saw you. Saw me? Even when you didn't. I saw your strength, your courage, your tenderness. The way you kept going, even when you had every reason to stop. That's survival, she said quietly.
No.
He said. That's you. Her throat tightened. He stepped closer. I love you, Elowen. She looked at him, then really looked, and saw every late night he'd stayed up drafting motions. Every gentle way he'd spoken to Isla. Every moment he'd chosen to stay, even when she pushed him away. But love, that word, it echoed through the hollow spaces in her chest. Not because she didn't feel something too, but because she was terrified. I want to believe in this, she whispered. But what if I ruin it? What if I bring the storm with me? Then we'll weather it together. And what if I can't love you the way you deserve? Theron smiled sadly. Then I'll still be grateful just to stand beside you. That broke her. Because she realized he didn't want to rescue her. He just wanted to walk with her. That night, after he left, she lay awake for a long time. Isla sleeping soundly down the hall. The air still holding the faintest trace of peppermint and pine. And somewhere inside her, the fear loosened. Not gone, but no longer gripping her throat. She sat up, grabbed her journal, wrote. He doesn't wait for me to be perfect. He just waits. And somehow, that feels like love. The next morning, she called Diana. Hey, she said, voice light. Mind keeping Isla one more night? Of course. Everything okay? Yeah, Elowen said, smiling. Everything's about to be. That evening, she showed up at Theron's door. Wedding no makeup. Hair in a braid. A single candle from hearth light in her hand. The label read, New Beginnings. He opened the door and froze. She didn't wait, just walked in, set the candle on the table.
Turned to him.
Ask me again, she said. What? Ask me again what you asked me last night. He stepped forward, eyes locked on hers. Elowen Reed, will you let me stand beside you? Not to fix you, not to save you, but just to love you. She smiled.
Yes.
Yes, I will. And in that moment, the girl who once feared the fire finally let herself bloom beside it. Mornings no longer came with dread. They arrived soft and slow, like Isla's small feet padding across the floor, like the smell of toast and cinnamon, like sunlight spilling through linen curtains. Elowen had begun to wake up before the alarm, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. There was peace in those early minutes, sipping tea on the porch with a blanket around her shoulders, listening to birdsong and silence. Not the silence of isolation, the silence of peace. And presence. 6 months had passed since the courtroom. The hearing that once felt like the climax of her life now sat folded away in memory, important, but no longer defining. Cale had disappeared from their world. There were rumors. Another failed startup, a minor arrest, whispers of bankruptcy. But Elowen no longer looked for updates. She'd stopped checking shadows. Hearthlight was thriving. Orders poured in daily. Bulk shipments to wellness studios, online customers from all 50 states, and even a few international inquiries. But more than business, it had become a community. A place where women, single moms, survivors, wanderers left messages.
Notes.
Letters. Some sent photos of the candles burning on nightstands or windowsills with captions like, "This is what healing looks like. This story gave me the courage to leave. I found myself in your words." Elowen printed them all and pinned them on the back wall of the shop. She called it the Wall of Flame. Theron showed up every Friday with lunch and a new dad joke. He was, by all definitions, not funny, but Isla howled with laughter every time. He was also not perfect. He sometimes worked too late, forgot where he put his keys, and had a habit of humming 80s love songs under his breath while folding laundry. But he was steady. And kind. And when she needed it most, quiet. The kind of quiet that listened, that stayed, that waited. One night, after Isla had gone to bed, wearing one of Theron's old t-shirts and 3 hair clips, Elowen stood in the kitchen, watching Theron fix a crooked cabinet hinge. He caught her staring and raised an eyebrow.
What?
I can be handy. She smiled. I was just thinking. I'm not used to things staying good this long. You're waiting for the sky to fall? A little. He put the screwdriver down and crossed to her. Let me tell you something, he said. The sky already fell, and you build a home beneath it anyway. She blinked. You're getting better at those one-liners. You're rubbing off on me. They didn't rush into marriage. There were no grand gestures. No diamond gemerschels. No awkward proposals in public. But one evening, in the garden behind the shop, with Isla picking marigolds nearby, Theron took her hand and said, "What if we just did the rest of life together?" And Elowen said yes. Not out of survival. Not out of fear. But because she wanted to stay. The wedding was small. Backyard. Fairy lights. Diana cried harder than anyone. Bon kept pulling Isla's flower crown crooked, and Elowen wore a dress she found secondhand and tailored herself. They danced to a song that didn't mean anything until it did. And when she looked into Theron's eyes, she realized, this is where the light stays. Not in the loud, not in the lavish, but in the love you choose every day. A few months later, Hearthlight launched a new candle line. They named it the Resilience Series. Each candle had a name. Soft Armor, After the Storm, Hollow to Whole, and one, which sold out every time, The Girl Who Left. Elowen started a podcast. It wasn't about candles. It wasn't even about motherhood. It was about becoming. Each week, she told stories, hers and others. Women wrote in, called in, cried, laughed, whispered things they'd never said aloud. She called it Light Stays. The tagline, we survive the fire, but we stay for the warmth. Some nights, when the wind was gentle and Isla was asleep in the room next door, Elowen sat on the porch with a book, wrapped in an old cardigan. Theron would join her, quietly sliding a cup of cocoa into her hands without saying a word. And they'd just sit. Two people. No more wars to win. No more ghosts to chase. Just presence.
And peace.
And that delicate kind of joy that sneaks up on you after a lifetime of noise. One night, Isla asked her the question, Mom, why did you leave my old daddy? Elowen stilled. The world froze. And then she set down her tea, bent beside her daughter's bed, and said, because I wanted us to be safe. But he was my daddy.
He was.
And he always will be a part of you. But love, real love, doesn't hurt people.
Isla thought about that.
Then whispered,
You chose me.
Elowen kissed her forehead. Always. In the quiet that followed, Elowen stood by the window, looking out at the night. And she thought of every woman who had ever packed a bag in silence. Every woman who cried behind locked doors. Every woman who walked into a courtroom with shaking hands and a steel spine. Every woman who stayed too long, and then finally left.
To them, she sent her light.
Not because she had all the answers, but because she finally understood this. You don't have to be fearless to start over. You just have to be tired enough to choose something better. And when you do, that's where the light stays. And that brings us to the end of today's story on Truistory Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.